Welcome to Reflections of a CEO, where I take you behind the scenes on what it's really like to run a business. In today's episode, I walk you through how we jumped from 1.5 to 2 million in revenue, where we were stalled for about 3 years, and how we jumped all the way up to 4 million in 1 year. So we went from 1.7 to $4 million, and I'm going to share exactly how we did it. I hope you enjoy the episode. Okay, so in today's podcast, I want to go through a couple things that I actually talked about on a call with another entrepreneur that I've never really shared before, and I thought, hey, I shared it with this one person. It's probably information that would be good for a lot of other people. So this one, just for context, right, and I'll lay out the scenario so that you have an understanding before I go on to what we actually talked about. So when we were growing Jakt, my agency, we hovered around 1.5 to 2 million in revenue for about 3 years. 2 million, 3 years. We were right around that mark, and I couldn't crack it. And so that's essentially what I was talking to someone else about, some challenges and issues that were coming up, and they were kind of stalled around that point as well. And I just told them, hey, the question was essentially like, what did you do to kind of break through? And there's no silver bullet, and there's not like one thing that I did, but there's a handful of things that I think were really important to help break through that mark. So one thing, and I'm just going to go down like a list of things that in no particular order that I think kind of helped us. So just to paint the picture a little bit more, when I started Jakt, we work primarily with startups. Okay, startups and smaller businesses. So project sizes were smaller. Working with startups, oftentimes they either go out of business, they run out of money, right? They're very risky to work with. They're also very exciting to work with. I love building something from the ground up and helping other businesses. We were specifically working with tech companies, which if you are familiar with Silicon Valley, tech companies, a lot of times, you raise angel money or VC money, and then it's really scale as fast as you can. So that's initially the type of customer we were working on in the early days. And so smaller projects, smaller budgets, because they might have raised $500,000 or something like this, which may sound like a lot, but it's really not a lot of money, because it's not like it was all going to us, right? So a high percentage, just probabilistically speaking, a lot of these companies go out of business. So retention, longevity on them is hard, which it translates then to retention being difficult. So imagine you're me, we're building this business, we have these customers, right? And there's essentially, we ran into this vicious cycle, right? Where you would have new customers, and then other customers would fall off. Retention would be not so great. And then we'd constantly be replacing. Right? We would add new customers, we'd lose them. Add new customers, lose them. Now, it's not just because they ran out of money or whatever it is. Sometimes it's because, hell, we even did poor work. That's the reality of it. Sometimes we didn't deliver as well as we should have, and we lost people, or our customer service wasn't good, or whatever it is, right? But the point is, we were losing customers at the same rate that we were gaining them. But a large reason for this, as I started analyzing our customer base, was the type of customer we are working with. They had smaller projects, smaller budgets, and then it could have also just been that they came to us for a project and then left. It's not that they ran out of money, they died, or we messed up. It's just, hey, the project stopped, right? So the type of engagement we had with them and the type of customer lent it to a very project-based, kind of high turnover-based business. So it's very difficult to build a base like that. So one thing that really helped us when I was looking at that is that, okay, that's the type of customer that has worked up until this point. You know, it got us to 2 million, but it's not going to get us to 4 million, right? That's just, I saw how it was going. Also, the amount of complexity adds to your business when you have a ton of smaller projects from a production side of things. There's a lot of issues with it. So one change that I decided to make was, hey, we really need, what would make it easier to get to 4 million is bigger projects and longer retention. So then we're not constantly just replacing business all the time, right? So that was my challenge. I was like, in theory, I was like, if I can get larger projects and larger and longer projects, it'll be easier to grow. And sure enough, that was actually the solve, one of the solves that really helped, right? It makes a lot of sense in theory, but then I had to execute it. So what did that mean for me? It meant, hey, let's stop working and concentrating as much with startups. Let's go a little bit upstream towards enterprise customers or businesses that have a good amount of revenue, that aren't in risk of going out of business, and also that the services we're providing aren't something that they would want to bring in house. So that's another part that I forgot to mention, is that a lot of the tech startups that we were working on, oftentimes they would also churn from us because they wanted to bring the service in-house because it was so core to what they were doing, right? So that's a big reason why we were losing customers as well. So I was like, okay, addressing all the problems that we're having. People are leaving because either they're too small, they're running out of money, they're bringing it in-house, they don't have enough money, whatever it is. I was like, I need to address all those problems that we're having. So my solve was larger customers, longer duration of projects, and working with customers where what we are doing is not core to their business, but is extremely important and adds a lot of value. So therefore, it's not a risk of bringing it in-house, right? So with that theme in mind, I started approaching companies, right? And, or not approaching them, it's more like the way I do business development, by the way, is I start telling the story and then have referrals and partners generate referrals for me. So I had my inbound funnel started to change because I consciously made that choice, right? And so then as I was walking into when I was getting these inbounds, they were now a different type of customer. So I started getting larger customers, enterprise or companies that were making significant revenue. And then I was able to, so that was step one. It was like, okay, now I need to change the customer type that was coming to me, right? But just because you get a potentially larger customer doesn't mean they're actually going to turn into a large customer for you, right? Like there's actually times when we work with large customers and they spend way less than any startup. So just because you have the large customer coming in doesn't mean they're going to spend a lot of money with you, right? So then once they're there, right, first is you have to attract the right customer. And then when we were tracking them, then the story I was telling was I was explaining how we like to work on long-term relationships, and was telling this story about essentially how we're going to be a partner with them for the long term. So instead of day one when someone's talking to us, instead of talking about a 2-month project, I was talking about a 6, 12 plus month project, right? I was framing that from the start. And so then instead of signing a 2-month deal, we're signing an ongoing super long deal. So then I started landing those projects, right? So bigger projects, they're spending more each month with us, and they're longer duration, right? So those two things, right? Attracting the right type of customer, then selling them this new kind of way, led us to some pretty explosive growth over the last year and a half or so, 2 years, where we were stuck at that 1.5 to 2 million and then jumped up to 4. Right, in a year, and actually the year before the 4 million, we actually had dropped below that 2 down to 1.7, right? So we more than doubled our revenue in a year, primarily because of what I'm talking about right now, changing the type of customer and the way we worked with them and framing it day one. If you look at that 4 million in revenue, the majority of it came from customers that started at the beginning of the year, right? Which means they stayed with us literally that entire year, like 3 million of it, right, was from longer term engagements, whereas before, if you looked at our past years, it was much less. It was maybe 50% or less was that, and then we turned it into 75% first off. So retention was better, right? Longer term engagements, and the projects were bigger. So look at those two little shifts and how that really propelled things, right? And it was also key to the retention was really that point about how it was super important to their business, but not the thing. Right, and so what do I mean by that? Let me just give you an example, right? So like, let's say that someone is running a physical store, right? But digital is super important, but not their main priority, right? Then they're like, hey, you can handle that entire thing. They're gonna focus on the physical, we'll focus on the digital, right? Or say we're working with a finance firm, right? And they wanna launch this new thing, but their main resources are tied on their main product, right? So we're like, okay, we'll own that thing. So just to give you kind of an idea of like they're super important things to the business, but not the main thing, not the only thing, right? Because when it's the only thing, people tend to say, wait a second, it's too risky not to have that in-house. Let me bring it in-house, right? So that's kind of what we did in that time frame. Right, and there's a lot of other benefits to that, right? Is that you're not working on as many projects. Now you got to be careful though. You don't want customer concentration, right? Where you only have 2 big customers and like one leaves and you're kind of screwed, right? So we had a handful of these bigger ones, and so if one left, it wasn't the end of the world, but it was still a good chunk, right? Like someone might be spending $40K a month with us, so if they leave, it's a issue. But locking in longer term deals, the other nice part about working with larger companies too is the risk of non-payment is much lower. They might be slower to pay you, so you have to be very smart about your cash flow, but you're less worried about them not paying you, right? Because they're just so big. And so that gives you more confidence in staffing up for a project, right? Versus like with a startup, if you're working with them, if you staff up, and this has actually happened to me, right? And they aren't transparent about their finances, and then they just don't have money to spend. Right, that's definitely happened to me in the past. So with larger companies, you can be a little bit more confident, right? They can also have budget issues though, like oh shoot, we got this, our budget got cut. That also happens. I've had that happen to me as well. But it doesn't happen as much, and you can kind of get ahead of it. They'll tell you, hey, in like 3 months we're not gonna have budget or whatever it is. But yeah, those couple changes, right? Larger customers, framing it as a longer term engagement, longer partner where there's no real end. It's kind of like, we need to keep working with you, and something that's non-core to their business. Those 3 things, non-core but super valuable, made it so that we could really grow. So, that's a piece of advice that, I had no idea about when I was doing this. And that's what I shared. It's not really necessarily advice. I don't really like the term advice, but it's more, that's what I did. Maybe someone out there who's listening to this, maybe you can use that as well, right? Just, if you just think about it mathematically, right? Building a business off of $2,000 a month retainers, right? And growing it is harder than if you're selling 10,000 or 20,000 a month retainers, right? Just mathematically, like you have to sell less, it's bigger stuff, right? Getting to $1 million in revenue, or getting to $4 million in revenue when you're selling 50K a month deals, right, is much easier, I think, than selling $2,000 a month retainers over and over again. That's the way we looked at it and I was specifically talking about an agency, right? So the person I was talking to ran a marketing agency. We run a design and development agency. I think it applies to multiple, whatever type of agency, PR agency, video agency, any sort of agency that you're running. I think this same lesson can apply, right? Bigger projects, non-core, right? Because if you're losing because people coming in-house, and longer term engagements, right? A lot of agencies that I've seen and talked to, they struggle with this as well. Like they only have 2-month, 3-month engagements, and that's hard. It's hard to build a business because then you just have the leaky bucket where you're getting new business and then it's leaving. Right, and so if you have a base of people, it's very easy to build on top. And to be honest, when we did that 4 million a year, I actually think we probably could have done 5, 6, 7 million. and I'll tell you why. Because 3 million of that 4 million were people that started at the beginning of the year, which means we only added on an additional $1 million in revenue. So it's actually pretty poor what we did. $1 million in new business, great, that's nice. But imagine we added 2 million or 3 million, right? In business, then we would have been at 5, 6. And I think that, you may ask, why didn't you do that? And to be honest, I think there's a couple reasons. One is the target for the year that I had was 4 million. So admittedly, a weird thing happens. Like when you set a target of 4 million, you're like, okay, we're actually like on track for this. For some reason, psychologically, I stopped selling as hard, or not as hard, but like wasn't pushing it. So I'm like, okay, we're gonna hit targets, and I took my foot off the gas, to be honest. And the other thing I will say is I got a little burnt out. After doing it for 6, 7 years. We were on target. It was a target that I had, and for me, I really wanted to achieve that 4 million, and that was kind of like my mark to hit before I started removing myself from the day-to-day a bit more. And we were on track. We hit it, and I just got a little bit tired. So that's the honest, transparent reason behind it. I think we could have pushed it to be higher. But yeah, that's what we did. If you're wondering, if you ever look at our financials, you'll see that stall, and then you'll see that growth, and that's basically what happened. So anyways, if you are at that $1 to $2 million size, and you're kind of around that area, maybe this will help. I think it will also apply though. I mean, think of if you're at $500,000 or whatever it is, just like take this information. I think I think it could potentially be helpful. Take it or leave it. But that's what we did, and that's what kind of worked. So, anyways, I don't want to drag it on. That's the point of this episode. Give you some information. Hopefully, it's usable, and that's it. So, reflection of SEO. Instead of telling you kind of like a present day thing, a little recap of something that happened in the past that I never recorded about, but figured it would be a good point to share. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or comments about this, please, seriously, now I'm not just saying this, message me on Twitter. That's where I'm most active right now, at Anthony Tumbiolo. Tweet at me. I love answering and engaging on there. Also, please subscribe to the podcast if you're not already subscribed. And yeah, that's it. So thanks again for joining Reflections of a CEO, and I hope to see you all next time. Bye.